Hello and welcome to this month's Gnosis drawing video. So as this drawing video is part of kind of the 2-year celebration mark for Gnosis, I thought I'd talk a bit more about kind of the thought into the setting that went into kind of creating Gnosis, and kind of the different options I was exploring after I'd finished Grats. So yeah, if that sounds interesting, you're welcome to stick around. Let's learn about that. And so since YouTube has kind of changed their algorithms, I guess, in last March, they care more about likes and comments. So if you think I earned those, feel free to drop those down at any time. So something else I'm trying to do is talk more about the drawing that I'm going to be doing here and such. And so kind of going into this special 2 months drawing, there's actually a couple little interesting details in here that I wanted to share kind of about its creation process. So as this is a 2-month drawing, 2-year, it's been a little longer than a month, drawing, kind of, there's a couple of things that I thought about I want to do with it. Since most of the voting pages, and basically all of them, are done by Akitsui and Levita, with 12 months in a year, this meant that as they alternated, they would always end up on the same months of every year. Well, I wanted to kind of shift that clock a bit, so it kind of had a yearly shift going on to it, so that way they can be the main voting page incentive for each different month of the year, kind of over time and whatnot. So that way, rather than, say, Levita always being stuck on Halloween, Akitsui could get a turn, and so on and so forth with that. So to kind of help make that happen, rather than just do a double up of one character for 2 months in a row, I put both of the characters, this time I'm going to be putting both of them in the birthday month. So in July going on. And so kind of in that respect, going forward, we'll use that to create the shifting process. So another kind of interesting thing about this drawing is I didn't use AI for this one at all. I've been using it to kind of like concept and try different ideas with stuff based off of sketches, and this one just didn't get that at all in it. So you won't see any sudden flashes of the drawing looking radically different in different stages from that part of it. But so I had a pretty good idea what I wanted to do. I was doing another playthrough of Skyrim, and I was looking at the orc heavy armor, and I kind of got this idea of a helmet of, what if it had like a skull at the top of it, and the mouth was like extended all the way down to like the chest, and so you had just this big kind of open mouth cavity area that the head and upper torso was in. And so that kind of became one of the big ideas with it, is this weird kind of oval gaping maw shape. And I think I like part of it. I like the bottom jaw, how it came together. I do wish I would have done the top part of the skull differently. But hey, you learn, and eventually I had to get this out, so I couldn't just redo the whole skull. So we'll be seeing that kind of we'll be seeing that on the Kitsu. Once again, as these are recorded drawing and the voiceover is done separately, I have no idea at what point in the time-lapse drawing this actually appears in. So that's just the nature as it goes. But because of that kind of very barbaric warrior aspect of the drawing of Akitsui, I wanted to balance that out with kind of a more mystical, magical side that Levita was going to do. So for her, I went with a kind of a different approach. I'm developing kind of more lore and such about how magic will work in this prototype setting, and so I try to incorporate some of those elements into it. So stuff like, like staffs will play a much bigger role in how magic works. It's not just waving your fingers and stuff happens. Kind of drawing a bit from, I guess, video games, is you need a catalyst to cast magic. So, like I said, staff are going to play a bigger role in that. And so I try to incorporate kind of like jewels and gold and stuff into her design to kind of denote, I guess you could say, being very regal and having a lot of magical powers, as opposed to Kitsui's more barbaric design that I went with her. And I think it came out really well. I think out of the two of them, I actually ended up liking Levita's design more than the Kitsui's this time around, because it's not like, I think it just ended up having a simpler feel and idea to it. Kitsui's ended up being very busy, but not in a very focused way, and so it's just kind of a bit of a scramble to try and put stuff together and try and create a unique feel to it that just never really worked out. So in other words, I might have to revisit that gaping maw helmet idea again, and so we'll see how that turns out. I do like how the background turns out in this one, with different kind of blur distance going on and such. And so that is one very nice thing that comes with it. But yeah, so that's just kind of some details about the drawing, and some little interesting aspects as it that I kind of went through while working on it. And just kind of lessons I've worked. I've heard the saying that you'll never do a perfect drawing, because everything you learn over the course of that drawing will inevitably go into your next one. So just by the nature of it, you can never put all your skills into one drawing, because you'll learn during that process. And so you'll be better at the end of it than you would be at the start. So yeah, so that's just a kind of fun example of this that's going on with it. And kind of why we got two characters in this drawing as opposed to one. So, kind of in that same line of the drawing video, like I said, talking about kind of, the setting of Gnosis and how it got started. I know there was a Ask the Cast one where I went into the details on the characters. I think it was Ask the Cast 7 if you wanted to go find that in the archive, where I provided kind of the concept art and the development process of each individual characters. So this isn't going to be about that. This is going to be more kind of just generic setting developing and idea forming and such that went into for the start of Gnosis. So after finishing Gratz, which was a very World of Warcraft inspired, and ultimately ended up being a very World of Warcraft derivative setting and story, I wanted to really take the full leap and be able to make something that was completely my own relative idea. All right, if it were to ever be able to take off and become big, it could. I could effectively publish it and market it and all that different jazz. Monetize it, that's the word, without needing to worry about the Blizzard IP copyrights and such. So that was kind of the idea, is something that was so legally distinct in its own way. Kind of my own original creation. So going off of that, I was looking at kind of two main settings. One was a continuing kind of in the fantasy setting, and the other was in a more sci-fi setting. Which would have been really different from what I had done before. And so one of the things I toyed around a lot with in the sci-fi setting was, well, do I want to do guns and weapons and different stuff, and how will that work with things? And kind of like how I like to do my action stuff or scenes, because I like a very well choreographed fight in my media. I'm not I'm not a fan of just kind of the trading lasers, which some anime seem to devolve into. It's just laser trading and such, and winding up for one really big hit that just annihilates the guy. I prefer a well choreographed fights with counters, pushbacks, change in strategies, create openings, punish openings, stuff like that. And so that's just something that I really enjoy. So when looking at kind of the sci-fi setting, it's like, okay, if I have guns, you can do like kind of the gun fu stuff, as they say, but they don't always lend themselves very well to that. What they lend themselves down very well to is team approach, the working together as a fire team, being able to coordinate stuff, sudden ambushes, I guess you could say, of fire, of like all of a sudden take an enemy fire and having to dive, just sudden, I guess you could say, shock moments. You do also have the really fun aspect with guns, where you can really lean into the mechanical components of them and such, and the I guess you could say kind of the weight and the kickback from larger guns, and the casings dropping, the muzzle flash and stuff. So there's lots of really fun stuff that you can lean into when animating and illustrating guns. And I mean, come on, there's nothing more, I guess, iconic of a warning than a shotgun pump. That shotgun pump is the warning shot. If you hear that, you better start running. That's your warning to get out. But yeah, so those are a lot of pros with kind of doing, I guess you could say, kind of a sci-fi setting, is being able to do stuff with guns. And even if they're, I guess you could say, kind of laser guns, you can still mechanicize them into, well, how does the laser work, all right? What's to stop it from just being a straight single long-held beam and turn it into, like, I guess you could say, a laser projectile? And how do you recoil? Like, so just say an example of that is, well, you got your little plasma charge in your gun and a magnetic field that will hold it, and where you get your recoil and your action cycling is essentially when you pull the trigger, this will throw a magnet forward that will hit the magnetic field holding the plasma and push it out of the barrel of the gun. And so that's how you get your laser shot bullet, is that magnetic field has to have force directed onto it to launch it from the gun, and it contains it in one small area as opposed to just a long continuous beam. So there you go, just kind of off the top of my head, something I was playing with about how do you make a mechanical laser gun that could be fun to illustrate and such. So those were some stuff I was playing around with there, but it wasn't quite what I was leaning into. I'm not really good at drawing mechanical stuff. I am trying to get better at it, just increase my skill set, but it's just something I'm not very good at. So, and like I said, I like the coordinated fight stuff, which guns don't always lend I say not coordinated, the choreographed fight stuff, which guns don't always lend their best to. So I was thinking and kind of going off, that's like, well, what if you had basically like an ammo system, all right? So like, you got your laser sword or your lightsaber or whatnot, it needs a battery on it to keep it running. And so essentially that, yeah, you can run out of ammo for your sword. Part of the problem with this is kind of became like, well, keeping the flashlight turned on or whatnot, I say a laser sword turned on, and essentially always draining that battery is probably going to be more consuming than firing off a single shot at a time or whatnot. Just because you only need to effectively drain the battery when you take that shot, as opposed to just holding the sword open. So that kind of became an issue. It was like, I don't know about that. How do I justify a laser sword in a setting or whatnot? So this is where we then started to see the development of the hilt. So if you've been reading Gnosis, you'll know the hilt is kind of the weird glove things that our characters wear and other people will wear and such, with the little jewel on the back of it, that effectively allows you to make weapons and tools. And that's not just me being exaggerating, saying, oh, well, weapons and tools or whatnot. It really is the purpose of that. So yeah, you can make a weapon or you can make a tool. Like, something that we want to think about is, say you have a saw, alright? Well, that can be a tool, but what would make a magic saw from a hilt better than just a regular steel saw is that your magic hilt saw will never dull. And so it will always maintain perfect level of sharpness. The blade will never dull, it will never chip, so it can be impossibly sharp, meaning that it's just going to be much easier to saw stuff with this, especially if you have to do a lot of cutting, rather than it would be with a steel saw or iron saw or whatever. So it's kind of that notion. Also other different stuff of, like in a time before you had motors, this is applying to Gnosis, you can make a hedge trimmer, so sticking with the, or I say a automatic saw, so sticking with kind of saw idea, what if the blades could move on its own, and so you basically had an electric saw that you could use to cut stuff, and this would be very useful in a time that before you had motors and such. So that's kind of something that's not always illustrated the most throughout Gnosis, but it's kind of something I played into the background setting, was the existence of a tool. Anima wasn't just about weapons, it was also about making tools. So yeah, I know that kind of derailed the little thought process about what a hilt is in this supposed sci-fi setting with kind of what it became in Gnosis. So that I suppose that's just a fun aspect of these videos, just kind of the conversation flow. So circling back to this supposed sci-fi setting, where the hilt originated, it was kind of an idea of being able to justify having laser swords or whatnot in a setting with guns that wouldn't rely on some kind of tying into the ammo capacity system or whatnot. And basically it was that hilt essentially had like the ability to construct stuff from, let's just call it nano dust or whatnot, alright? And that would effectively serve as your ammo. So you could use the hilt to construct, say, your sword, and because it was not losing, or essentially, I would say a sword or a gun, alright? So you could use this nano dust to build a gun, but when you would shoot it, it would have to construct bullets from the same nano dust, and then that would get flung out. So that is your actual, I guess you could say, ammo resource, was how much of this nano dust was in your hilt glove. And so that would deplete over time as you're literally throwing away nano dust to make your projectiles. So that would be your ammo consumption on it. Whereas if you use the sword, it would just have to maintain the sharpness as it collided with stuff and have a bit of bleed off of just kind of exposure to the environment and such. And so it would consume less ammo to be fighting with that than it would be with a gun, right? In that setting. And so you'd have stuff that, like, your nano dust would deplete, so you need to like eject at the time it's like a little disc thing from the back of your glove and put in a new disc, so that way you can reform your weapons and such. Kind of in line with that, there are different ideas of like modifications you can make and such. So like, since your dust or your gun was made from the nano dust, you didn't need a magazine. Ammo would be formed directly into the firing chamber. So kind of tying into that idea is that you could make, essentially, I guess I could say, illegally modified weapons in some way, where, say, you made like a little pistol, but rather than having a firing trigger mechanism that go on that depend on how fast you could pull your the trigger of your finger, it was just constantly cycling the firing pin in there. So meaning as soon as you formed it, that firing pin was actuating, and ammo would just pop in there and get fired off immediately, continuously. So essentially, you could have a impossibly high rate of fire pistol that you just pop on and just go burp. So that's just kind of some ideas of playing with the setting and such, and there are things that could be done with it. Now, I don't know creatively how much this matters, per se, or how much other creatives do this. Of basically, you make your rules of your settings, and then you try and experiment with, well, what's possible, and do you like that or not? So to try and figure out, well, is my setting too restrictive, or is it too loose in there? What's to keep someone, so like sticking with the sci-fi hilt, what's to stop someone from just making a atomic bomb with their glove, and then that detonates? So a suicide atomic glove, is that something that I want in my setting or not? And then you just kind of play around with that idea and such before kind of forming it. So I don't know how much for other creators do that, but that's just something that I've done and have found kind of interesting when doing these prototype in the prototype stages of stuff. So then, kind of in that line of story telling and experimenting, guys, thinking, okay, well, what kind of story can I tell in this setting? And I ended up kind of drawing a lot of inspiration from Outlaw Star. If anyone's seen that, I guess old anime now, where the story would kind of center around a ship with a small crew, and then finding a ancient being or whatnot that basically had the power to generate anima dust. And so that way this would give him effectively a unlimited supply of the stuff that they could use throughout their adventures and such. And so that was kind of an idea with it. I came up with like I guess you could say an action scenario where our hero, he uses like a this sci-fi nano dust to form a grapple hook that he grapples onto the back of a giant monster on, zips up on it, and then he's standing on like the back of it with the hook still anchored, forms like a big handgun or whatnot, and just starts unloading essentially point blank into the back of this monster. And this was just like a little idea of an action scenario of, okay, using kind of rules that I've established as settings or whatnot, what kind of little set pieces could I make with that? And so that was kind of one idea. Now, a couple of those things might sound rather similar already to what we have in Gnosis. Or what we would end up, I guess, getting in Gnosis, a kind of a grapple hook whip combination thing. And a source of unknown power or whatnot that breaks the rules. So essentially we got kind of the earliest stages of prototyping of a Kitsui and Levita in there, and even a bit with Zenji of just kind of the harder action and whatnot in there. What ultimately made me move away from that setting was I didn't want to do a whole lot of mechanical stuff. It's just something I wasn't very good at. And at the time I was watching, gameplays of different games and such. And I was watching Xenoblade Chronicle 2. And that first-ish area of the game, on the back of the Titan with the big trees and everything, I just really ended up liking a lot. I really liked this, liked that idea of just these massive trees and kind of the more hodgepodged buildings that were put together, kind of built into the environment and such, and just working with the limited space. So that ended up having a lot of influence on kind of the setting I wanted to create. And so the sci-fi hilts with nano dust got turned into kind of a anima system, and relied more on this essentially just, I guess you could say, magic at that point to operate. One of the things that I also wanted to address was kind of this idea or philosophy that in the real world and in a lot of narrative settings, that power only really comes from, I guess you could say, particular training, all right? Like, let's just stick with the real world. If you want to be strong and, I guess you could say, dangerous or whatnot, you need to be exercising, practicing weapon skills, doing weapon drills, all this other different stuff, yada, yada, yada. All right? But I wanted essentially a setting where it wasn't just learning one particular skill set that would lead you to becoming strong. All right, I wanted it to be the process of learning and growing, which is the strength in itself, that becomes strong. So essentially, anyone who continues to learn and grow and try themselves in life, regardless of what it may be, will develop essentially anima in their system. And with more anima, you can form weapons and tools for longer periods of time and more complicated ones and do different things with them. And so what I really wanted to do was reward the process of always learning and growing. That's something that I would say real life isn't always the best at. It rewards you for learning and growing certain things, but not for just in general always pursuing learning and growth itself. And so that's just kind of an idea of something I wanted in this fantasy setting of addressing that, but kind of making that something in there. Because I do believe it is important for us to always be learning and growing. And that kind of stagnation is really the death of a lot of stuff. There's, I think, I think it's a Mark Twain quote of something that most men die when they're 20 or something like that, and they spend the next 60 years to get into the ground or something to that effect. But basically, maybe 20 is a little young, maybe it's 30. But basically the idea that, we quit trying and then we just kind of exist. I wanted to encourage this idea in our own life that we should always be trying, say not new stuff or pursuing learning and growth. There's a great saying that my grandpa has that I like a lot, and that is that the more I learn about something, the more I find I don't know. So for learning and growing, for some people, it's trying a whole lot of different experiences, and learning for those. From others, it's just digging down real deep into something and finding more and more that they can learn about it. And as they learn more, they find more they don't know, as my grandpa said. And so I just kind of wanted that to be not strictly a core part of the narrative of Gnosis, but just kind of the setting that we should keep exploring and such, and basically finding joy in that, represented by strength in a story. So that's just kind of a fun little component to that. So once like I said, when really inspired by the art of Xenoblade Chronicle 2, decided to go with a sci-fi setting, because this would also allow me to kind of do more choreographed fights and such that would be easier. But I wanted to, it's like, okay, well, how things kind of gonna work in this setting? So I got kind of my anima stuff of people learning and growing, and that could translate into power. So I can start getting kind of those more anime fight scenes, like running on walls, doing a slash, and a slash wave comes out, and combining that with intense choreographed fights. So it's like block a strike, do a kind of counter blow that the other person dodges, and then you take a wide swing at them and they jump back to avoid that. And then when that someone jumps back to avoid that wide swing, they counter with let's call it a slash wave anima strike that will close up the gap and hit the other person that in the space that was created. So kind of just a back and forth aspect to it that would go into using the magic stuff of the fights, where it was more about creating openings and exploiting them, rather than just raw trying to overpower stuff. And if you've been reading the latest pages of Gnosis, you could kind of really see that, where that has gone into effect in the storytelling, especially with kind of Zenji's Brutus, and I think the Monkey Warrior's name, I think I called him Demo or something like that, kind of their fight going on, where it's about setups and executions and even positioning and stuff in there as the fight goes on, or has happened in it. The fight's still going on, but that's just something interesting that lined up very well as I'm talking about this, where we're at in the story. So that's kind of why I ended up, in part, kind of what ended up forming the settings and the ideas that shaped Gnosis was basically a way of how do I do a actions or set up a narrative and setting where the action scenes I like to illustrate and watch and such are possible, how the rules can justify that stuff, kind of what does the setting and environments look like in art that I want to be drawing, and kind of how it all came together to help form and shape Gnosis. One of the things I suppose I forgot before I gave that bit of a wrap up was, since Gnosis was no longer going to be a sci-fi setting with possibility of multiple planets and such, I wanted a setting where if growth was kind of the background idea of the setting, where adventure was always possible. So I went with kind of the world that's yet been formed, and still in the process of being formed. So if I have to set it like in the timeline of our own world, I guess you could say narratively, it would actually set place like probably before the before even the sixth day of creation or whatnot. Before man was on the earth. So the earth is still just constantly changing, and I say changing and such, but being shaped and built. Much like how this world worked, and that was kind of the idea of it. And so that way, you always have new horizons that emerge in this place for new adventure, new explorations and such. Cities are kind of hodgepodge together of what resources are available rather than well-established, I guess you could say, supply lines and trade routes. And they're built not always in the most convenient manner, because when they were first built, the landscape was different. Well, the landscape has drastically changed now, and so adjustments have had to be made. So kind of using that to create more unique feeling cities that are like, I guess, as I said, tucked away into the world and such. And so it was now kind of wrapping this all back into the wrap up, I guess, with it. But basically, a lot of those thoughts kind of went into forming Gnosis, of always having a new horizon that you can explore, always having the pursuit of learning and growing equal power and possibilities. And kind of being able to have just strange and unique things around the place, of animals that look familiar but are quite different, of like plants and color, I say, of different colors and such. So yeah, a lot of that kind of went into forming the setting of Gnosis, and kind of what how it all narratively was put together and such. And this was before the characters were even fully created. So yeah, I hope you found this video interesting, and maybe even inspiring or helpful as you want to create something on your own. Just gradually piecing stuff together. Now, I should say clarify, but talk about, it's not like I did this all in one afternoon. It's took me like 30 minutes to try and remember it and tell you about it, but I probably spent months just here and there trying different ideas of stuff, because sometimes I might have one idea that I liked, and then like a few days later or whatnot decide, I don't really like that. Or as I made some adjustments to different rules and such, what was a old rule I found then conflicted with a new rule, so I'd have to make adjustments to make stuff happen properly in that respect. So it's just kind of a long process where time is actually a bit of an ally on it, because it gives you time to stew stuff over and try new things and then find what works and doesn't work. And something else that could be useful is talking with friends or family about this. Someone that obviously that you trust and value their feedback on, so you could get a sense that as you're explaining it to someone, does it make sense to someone who doesn't understand it? Can they start to grasp the vision and such with that? But yeah, so thank you for joining me for this drawing and kind of the background of Gnosis. I hope you found it interesting. If you think that I earned a like and comment from you, go ahead and share it. Apparently YouTube helps that out a lot with the videos getting around. And I also want to take a moment to thank the Patreon members. So if you so special thanks to our amazing supporters of Mom, Iran Reed, and the Animus Seer. If you feel that I've earned your patronage, go ahead and stop on by and check out some of that stuff. There is a exclusive Patreon member page, as well as this drawing that you can pick up. And I think right now I actually just put up another drawing that's available for free. That was done in the that you can see the kind of the time lapse done in the shorts category if you want to go pick that up. But yeah, so I hope you have a great day and see ya next month.